To the extreme south of the Cyclades Islands, in the Aegean Sea, Santorini is not quite an island. It is an archipelago resulting from a cataclysm, the result of a volcanic explosion with power unmatched since then. In 1620 BC, what was then called Calliste, the most beautiful, bursts and disappears, pulverized. Only fragments of the island remain, forming a ring around the central part invaded by waters. At the center of this immense caldera, a crater eventually reappeared 3,000 years later, a sign that the volcano is not dead. All emerged land surfaces were covered with a mantle of ash and pumice up to 200 feet thick. For 4 centuries, the devastated island was abandoned. Then men returned to Santorini to cultivate one of the rare plants that could prosper on such poor, dry soil, the grapevine. Only a few specific grape varieties would be able to bear the extreme aridity. Today, this vineyard, one of the oldest in the world, continues using viticulture methods and making wines inherited from antiquity. Some have long thought that Santorini was the place where Atlantis, the mythical city evoked by Plato, would have been submerged. Today, the waters of the largest caldera crater in the world still hold surprises and secrets. Yannis Paraskiopoulos is attempting an extraordinary experiment, making the wine of the sea, the Thalassitis. From the grapes of Assertico, the native grape variety of Santorini, Yannis produces a white wine that he ages in bottles for several years, 65 feet under the ground. A very small, exceptional production of several hundred bottles, like a buried treasure. An oenological experiment, as well as a dive into the mythical depths of the island.
We try to find the optimal conditions for aging our wine. Underwater aging is a possibility. Underwater, the wine can't absorb oxygen and won't oxidize, so it can be aged as long as we want. We can say that our wines are the wines of fire and water, the fire of the volcano and the seawater, because the sea influences the wine enormously. In Viticulture, we have an impressive view of the landscape's layers. We clearly see 2 layers of volcanic deposits from 2 different explosions. A first lighter layer, measuring between 20 to 26 feet, and a second layer of around 130 feet. This is exactly the type of soil in which we plant our vines. This is purely volcanic ash, the deposit from the last explosion. It has no organic matter or clay, yet it is very fertile. It apparently can't retain moisture, and of course, there is no water resource. This is the exact soil in which we grow our iconic grape variety, Assertico.
This is the whole paradox of Santorini. From a catastrophe is born a miracle, that of a vineyard of extraordinary longevity. Protected from fungi and bacteria, by dry winds and heat, Santorini is above all one of the only vineyards in the world entirely spared from the phylloxera, The absence of clay in the volcanic ash prevents the proliferation of this predatory insect. Joanna's vines grow on this mantle of magma and pumice. She is an oenologist. She joins Petros Economous, her agronomist, who recalls that the famous explosion, so important for the island's vines, was not the first.
Each time, different explosions added additional layers of deposits. If you look at the cliff from the Emirovigli village up there to the sea, we go back 1 million years. Each layer corresponds to an explosion. The last one was 3,500 years ago. They generally occur about every 20,000 years. I hope we'll both still be around for the next one.
You think? Tell us about the Kouloura.
Kouloura is a cultural heritage, a special way of pruning. Here, watch. So now we leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We trim above the 9th bud, okay? We always choose the strongest shoots, with buds as close as possible. And now, we'll weave the crown.
You're not afraid of breaking them?
That's a good question. That's why we're careful to weave them when the vines have moisture in them. This one will grow and hug itself with its branches, protecting itself from the wind and sun. You see, it's 8 p.m. and the sun is still very strong.
Another technique, layering, allows the vines to regenerate themselves almost eternally. A branch of the Kouloura is removed and buried in the soil, in clearing its tip. Once the branch has taken root, it will be cut from the mother plant. A new vine, literally cloned from the first, is obtained. The vines thus preserve the oldest genetic heritage in the world. During the grape harvest period, the few Santorini cellars undertake a veritable grape race, with thousands of small producers on the island. Yields are low, and grapes are highly coveted. Yanis has no vines. He tours all the corners of the island to buy grapes from a dozen selected winemakers.
Hi, Tanis.
You good?
Hello, Stelio. How are you?
Hello, Yanis. Fine, thanks.
You're finishing the harvest today?
Yes, we'll harvest the red next.
Tell me, how have we done this year? €2.60? Is that good?
Listen, I think next year we won't have a lot of grapes. We had a dry winter, and we know production won't be big. We have to be paid better this year.
Okay, how much do you think?
I don't know, 20 cents more?
€2.80?
$2.80 is okay.
Deal.
Yanis continues his quest for grapes. This time, he visits one of the oldest wine growers, the guardians of ancestral techniques and traditions, a character in Santorini.
Hello.
Hello, Elias.
It's nice to see you again. Let me tell you, Yanis, I've had this land for 30 years. I paid 900,000 drachmas, not even 2,500 euros, 30 years ago. I've been taking care of the vines for 30 years. I was young, but now I am old. And I lost an eye, but I'm still here, thank God.
You're in great shape.
On this plot, you'll get 100 cases of white and roughly 25 of red, but they're very good.
Don't worry, we'll come to an agreement.
Okay, Yanis, go over there and I'll show you how it's done.
Ilias practices another special technique that makes for the exceptional age of the vine. The crown of the plant is totally decapitated so that it regenerates from the vine stock.
You see, if we cut at the foot of the vine, next year it will grow back from this bud here. We can decapitate it every 80 years, depending on the strength of the plant. We'll cut it right here.
Come, Elias.
If the Kouloura is regularly decapitated to regenerate from the vine stock, the Eniampella are vines that are allowed to grow to reach surprising heights. These are the oldest vines that can be found on the island.
You see here a traditional Assertico vine, the endemic variety of Santorini. Year after year, winemakers have added a new full turn to give it this basket shape. If we count the number of rings of wood, we can calculate the approximate age of the vine. We can assume that this one is 120 years old, meaning at least 5 generations of winemakers. But the root system, can easily be between 400 and 500 years old. So we can deduce that 20 generations of winemakers have taken care of this vine.
But how far back does the origin of vineyards in Santorini go? Did it exist before antiquity, even before the cataclysm? If the volcano's explosion destroyed all life on the island for several centuries, it also extraordinarily preserved the oldest known port of the island, Akrotiri. Buried under volcanic ash, the site of Akrotiri offers a snapshot of this opulent civilization, erased within a few minutes in 1620 BC. After a very violent earthquake, a first explosion warns the inhabitants, who abandon the city indefinitely. But very quickly, a second explosion equivalent to 40 atomic bombs buries the whole island under fiery dust and triggers a gigantic tsunami over the entire eastern Mediterranean. Even those who try to escape by boat do not survive. Christos Doumas has been working on the site since its discovery 50 years ago. Director of excavations, he knows every stone.
This building is the largest we've found. It was built with great care, as can be seen from the construction of these walls. It had 4 floors, and I think it must have been a public building, maybe even the administrative center of the city. I hope one day we will find a lot of information inside, and probably archives and inventory documents that would detail the relationship of this civilization with the rest of the world.
All of the houses excavated were decorated with frescoes, which reveal a highly refined Cycladic civilization that rivaled ancient Egypt. Its maritime trading region extended to Spain and present-day Turkey. The abrupt disappearance of this still ill-known civilization would have inspired Plato with the myth of Atlantis.
Here we found a category of jars which were only used to transport liquid goods, mainly oil and wine, which were exported to different regions. The fact that a jar of this type was found recently in Marseille, France, during underwater research, proves that this wine trade reached that far. We also discovered an inscription on a piece of jar, which mentions the word wine on its collar. Another clue telling us that these amphorae were destined for wine is that they have a spout at their base. It's believed that the symbols that decorate them, concentric circles, denote the different qualities or types of wine, old, young, etc. I think I've found enough evidence to convince anyone that yes, we had much viticulture here before the explosion of the volcano.
Virtually no written records, only a skeleton found. Christos Jumas is certain that the ground of the site still shelters many secrets. It's the middle of August. Even before the first light of dawn, Haridimos and his harvesters perpetuate the ancient tradition of the harvest of nectari, a wine that exists only in Santorini, the wine of the night.
We call it nectari, firstly because we harvest it at night, but also because we press it the next night.
Haridimos watches over the harvest, which must absolutely be finished before 10 o'clock in the morning.
We come here very early for the cool morning air, and today there's a little wind from the north. That's very nice. That way the grapes remain fresh, more alive. What we gain working fast at night is that we conserve all the flavors in the grape. The second important point is that we grow Assyrtiko, the best variety on the island, which can adapt to the soil and give amazing results in it. Finally, the dry climate, making the soil barren with little rain and very strong winds, all that combines to give this a fantastic terroir.
Haridimos is renowned for making the best nectari on the island. He greets his friend and merchant Yorgos, come specially to taste his 2014 nectari.
The nectari in the past resisted the challenges, particularly oxidation. All agency wines oxidized and needed to be filtered through plaster to be preserved. But Santorini's wines, and specifically the nectari, needed no additives for their preservation. Firstly, thanks to its acidity, and also the high alcohol level.
So these dry, very acidic and alcooleux wines were able, for the first time, to travel, even for long voyages.
That's right.
How were they shipped?
By boat, in barrels, and they survived the conditions. They were consumed by the Russian aristocracy.
On her domain, where the cellars are dug from a layer of volcanic ash, Ioana Vanvacuri shows her passion for the history of the Santorini wine trade. It is perhaps one of the first wine trading sites in the Mediterranean. Today, she has found late Ottoman letters from the mid-19th century in the municipal archives. What I understand is that there is an export restriction of 7,000 barrels to the Ottoman Empire. That's all I can decipher. These records show that this is a product with a very long history. We can see here, for example, that until 1840, these wines were still exported to the Ottoman Empire. But we also found evidence that proved that they were exported long before, all the way to Russia, during the Venetian rule from the early 13th century. Because of its strategic geographical position, for more than 3,000 years, Santorini has been one of the three most important ports in the eastern Mediterranean basin for trade between Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. Trade based on the exchange of olive oil, wheat, and wine. The truth is that wine, the vineyards, grapes, have always been the most important economic factor on the island. They were not only wine producers, they were also exporters. This is why many of them turned to maritime transport, becoming boat captains. They were bringing this wine to the rest of Greece and to other countries. The wine that best embodies the incredible heritage of Santorini is the Vinsanto, a sweet wine that has its roots in Greek antiquity, and of which the poet Hesiod, from the 7th century BC, shares the secret with us.
When Orion and Sirius reach the middle of the firmament, and rose-fingered Aurora contemplates Ursa Major, then Titan, pick and take your grapes home. Expose them to the sun for 10 days and 10 nights. Keep them in the shade for 5 days, and on the 6th, pour them into jars, a joyous gift of Dionysus.
This ancient method is called passerillage, naturally drying the grapes. Ioana faithfully perpetuates it to make her Vinsanto, literally the wine of Santorini. Here we have clusters that have been drying for 3 days already. The grapes absorb the sun, lose their water, and become gradually like a dry raisin. We see how their color changes, giving them this special caramel brown coffee color. In the 12th, 15th, and 17th centuries, several travelers, mostly French, came to the island and spoke not only of Vinsanto, but also of winemaking culture. We know that boats passing through here took Vinsanto aboard and drank it for breakfast. We have many testimonies showing they traveled all the way to Russia to be used as communion wine by the Russian Orthodox Church. In the evening, Yanis joins Ioana to compare their Vinsanto, this wine with aromas of chocolate.
You know what I like so much in Vinsanto? And yours is a perfect example, Ioana. What I think is the mark of a wine of great quality is its memorability, its ability to create memories. It's a flavor you can't forget. This fragrance will combine with this moment and the moments lived in the past.